You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
When they don't say that unions can't guarantee this or that thing, they're going to point at things that unions do try to do and try to twist it and make it sound bad. One of the things that unions often bargain for is seniority. And that's a good thing. I think that if you talk to anybody, you're going to think that, oh, yeah, if I have given my 30 best years to a company, I should have some protection that people who just started working here last week, they might not have. I think if you talk to anybody, I think that makes sense. But let's go to seniority in the folder, Adam, and see how they try to twist it and make seniority a bad thing.
Well, thanks for coming in. As you know, we need to talk about the vacancy in your department and who's the best person to fill it. And I've asked Tom to sit in since he's the union steward now.
Oh, well, I think Jim has done the best job of anyone, and he'd make a good choice.
Hold on now. I have the seniority list right here, and it says that Andy's number one. Now, Jim's way down the list here.
Yeah, but Andy isn't really the leader that Jim is.
Well, is Andy a bad employee?
No, he does all right, but Jim...
Well, then is he a discipline problem?
No, not really, although his attendance could be better.
I see. Well, does he have any warnings for bad attendance?
No, but Jim is a better worker. And
well, I'm sorry, but the contract the company signed clearly states that we go by seniority, which makes Andy the only choice. So if you folks will excuse me, I'm off to give Andy the good news.
All right. So, Connor, what's your first take on that?
I wish to God I had that much power. Oh, my God, that's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, no union steward, no union rep can cruise into a meeting with that kind of energy. I mean, that's just not how it works. I think that the idea that, first off, the idea that management is legitimately making the best decisions based on performance, any employee can tell you flat out, that's not how it works. Right. Management plays favorites. They do not actually have like an objective view of employee performance and who's going to do the best job. They're going to play favorites. And I think that anyone intuitively knows that that's how management operates. They are going to put the person they want, whether or not that person is the right person for the job. And that's just ultimately how it's going to play out. And even if there are, evaluation or performance, like measurement systems in place, we all know as well that on any kind of evaluation, the outcome is going to depend on what mood your boss is in that day. I mean, those are not fair or objective. So the idea that you suddenly have, a union steward swaggering into a meeting to just pull out the seniority list and say, well, this person's getting the job. One, that's not how it works. And two, I think that if you take a step back and actually look at, okay, how does this decision-making process work? And how does management actually decide? In my experience, how do they decide who gets, the job? Well, usually the people that get promoted are the people that aren't arguing with management and do whatever management wants, not necessarily the best person for the job. So, I mean, the whole premise of it is just totally off from, I think, what any worker has experienced in their workplace. And that's when you get back to the fact that, ultimately there is no perfectly fair system. Seniority is the fairest of the possible situations. And I think it's reasonable that, look, if this employee is not a bad employee, they've done their work, they've, put in their time, they've gained experience that other employees may not have, then that employee, should get the opportunity for a promotion.
Right. And, this is something that RWDSU was mentioning to employees, that seniority isn't the only thing that people bargain for, and you can bargain for. And in a lot of contracts, they do have performance-based raises and promotions as well as seniority. So it's not an either-or thing. You can have both, and you can fight for both. And who decides what to fight for? It's the membership, right? So if you want more performance-based raises and promotions, or you want performance to count for a higher, to count for more in that decision-making process, then do that. It's up to you. You're the union.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, again, that, there's just this one way that unions do things. I mean, there are ways that, in my experience, I have, a perspective on kind of the best case scenario of how things should operate. But ultimately, unions as an outside party or whatever, don't impose things on workers. Whatever actually comes out of it is going to be what the workers want, just like you said. So if they genuinely want something that's more performance-based or whatever, then they can do that. And ultimately, transferring between positions, not every contract says that, it's automatically going to go to the person with seniority. Absolutely. That's not what every contract says. A lot of them still give management discretion over, who actually gets the position.
Right. Yeah, I mean, their portrayal of the union steward and the contract, I mean, that would be a crazy contract, right, that for any company to agree to. And that's not the kind of contracts that are actually signed, that give, that have that much power for the workers, which, that would be great if that was the type of contract that gave unions unilateral control over, the workers unilateral control over who got promoted and how, that would be great, but that's not the world that we live in, clearly.
I mean, that's something that realistically, that was a big part of what unions pushed for up until the 1950s. And, that kind of more control over the operations, over kind of these kinds of decisions. And ultimately, I mean, we were forced to kind of give that up. Now, whether or not that's a good thing, I think it's a bad thing. But I mean, that is the world that we live in, that we don't have the level of power that they're trying to portray in there. Now, I wish we did, because I think that anyone would agree that workers are going to make better decisions about those things than management usually is, but that's just not the world we inhabit.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely the case. And talk to us about, you've mentioned this before, the Treaty of Detroit, in some of your writings. Can you give us a rundown of exactly what that is in relation to worker control of what happens in the company?
So the very, very kind of brief kind of summary of it is the Treaty of Detroit was this contract that was signed between General Motors and the UAW. I think it was 1950. And one of the big pushes that the UAW had been really kind of angling for was more control over business decisions, more control over actual directing the enterprise, not just, shop floor decisions, but also big picture decisions about how General Motors and also Chrysler and Ford were actually managed, with the idea that workers should have much more control in how the operation actually worked. And so what ended up happening, which ended up, I think, kind of setting the pattern for how contracts and collective bargaining law evolved over the next, up until now, is they ended up giving that up and ceding the idea that management has inherent rights that they don't have to bargain over, that they just automatically have, which the default one is, to control and direct the operations of, the enterprise. And they also gave up a 5-year agreement, which up until that point, the UAW had really only agreed to 1-year agreements, right, and they almost always led to strikes. And so GM and then Chrysler and Ford signed similar agreements. So, they gave up a lot of stuff on the economic end. They gave up profit sharing. They gave up pretty good health insurance, pensions, that kind of thing, wage increases that really kind of vaulted UAW workers into the middle class. But UAW gave up this push for more actual power over how the business operated, which ended up really, not playing out too great over the course of the next, especially once you got into the 1970s. That really ended up, I think, hamstringing not just the UAW, but a lot of organized labor.
If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week and get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We are on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. And if you missed part of the show and want to watch it later, you can go to YouTube at The Valley Labor Report. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps, so you can find us on your listening platform of choice at thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We have a website where you can buy our hats and stickers. Somebody accidentally bought too many, so we thought we were out, but we've got 2 more that were returned. So if you still want a hat, we've got 2 more left. That is thevalleylaborreport.org. And the best way that you can support the show is by throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report.